On the edge of the Atlantic, where the sun painted the horizon with strokes of orange and pink, the small coastal town of Seabridge welcomed a group of eager young friends. Jenna, Alex, Marco, and Leah had been planning this beach getaway for months, celebrating their recent graduation with a promise of adventure and relaxation. Their journey to Seabridge was filled with laughter and the buzz of excited chatter about the beach parties, midnight swims, and the freedom that awaited them. As they drove through the town, with its quaint shops and the salty breeze mingling with the scent of fried seafood, the energy was palpable. They rented a cozy beach house that stood on stilts with a perfect view of the crashing waves. The house was decorated with seashells and hues of blue and white, creating a serene escape from their bustling city lives. Unpacking quickly, they donned their swimwear, eager to feel the sand between their toes and the ocean's embrace. The beach was a stunning expanse of golden sand, meeting the deep blue of the Atlantic. As they set up near the water's edge, the sound of the waves called to them, a soothing rhythm that promised a perfect start to their vacation. They played in the surf, chased each other with the energy of youth, and as the sun began to dip, they built a bonfire, around which they gathered as the night grew dark and the stars took over the sky. As they roasted marshmallows and shared stories, a local, an old fisherman named Mr. Ketch, approached them. His face was weathered from years at sea, and his eyes held stories of the deep waters. Intrigued, the friends invited him to join them, offering a toasted marshmallow as a peace offering. Mr. Ketch accepted with a nod and settled down beside the fire. "You're brave kids to be swimming these waters," he started, his voice a low rumble against the crackling fire. "This part of the Atlantic has tales that could curdle your blood. They're not just stories to scare the little ones. No, these are warnings." The friends exchanged uneasy glances, the atmosphere shifting slightly. Jenna, always the brave one, chuckled. "You mean like shark stories? We've seen Jaws. We can handle a fishtail or two." Mr. Ketch shook his head slowly, his eyes fixating on the dark waves behind them. "Not just sharks, my dears. There's something much bigger, something ancient. They say it's as old as the ocean itself. Megalodon, they call it. A giant predator, lurking in the deep, waiting for the unsuspecting." Marco laughed, brushing off the chill that ran down his spine. "Megalodon. Those are extinct." But Mr. Ketch didn't smile. "That's what they want you to think. But every few years, strange things happen here. Boats go missing, swimmers disappear, and the sea becomes restless." The group was silent now, the fire casting ghostly shadows as the old man's words hung in the air. Finally, Leah spoke, her voice a whisper. "Is that why you don't swim anymore, Mr. Ketch?" He nodded slowly, pointing to a scar that peeked out from under his sleeve. "Had my run-in with something big years ago. I was lucky to make it back to shore. Not everyone does." The night grew colder, and the friends sat closer to the fire, the excitement of the day turning to a tense curiosity. They didn't notice the pair of glowing eyes watching them from the waves, or the subtle shift of the ocean as something massive moved beneath its surface. Their adventure was just beginning, and the tale of the Megalodon was no longer just a story. As the fire died down, they retreated to their beds, the ocean's roar a constant reminder of Mr. Ketch's warnings. But young hearts are brave, and the call of the unknown was too strong to ignore. In the safety of their beach house, as they drifted to sleep, none could imagine the thrilling and terrifying events that awaited them with the rising sun. The morning after their eerie encounter with Mr. Ketch, the group woke to a bright, sunny day that seemed to mock the foreboding tales of the night before. The beach beckoned with its warm sand and inviting waves, and the memory of the fisherman's warning faded under the clear blue sky. After a hearty breakfast, they decided to take a boat out into the deeper waters, a rented vessel that promised a day filled with laughter and exploration. As they prepared for their ocean adventure, Leah couldn't shake off the chill from last night's stories. "Do you really think there's something out there?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marco, ever the skeptic, scoffed as he loaded the cooler. "It's just old man tales, Leah. There's nothing out here but fish and maybe the odd harmless shark." They set sail mid-morning, the boat cutting through the waves with ease. Jenna stood at the bow, the wind tangling her hair as she laughed, pointing at dolphins playing in the wake. Alex took the wheel, feeling the thrill of commanding the small craft into the vast blue. The unease of the previous night seemed a distant memory, washed away by the spray of salt water and the thrill of the open sea. But as they ventured further from shore, the sky began to darken unexpectedly. Clouds rolled in, casting a shadow over the water. The wind picked up, stirring the waves into choppy turmoil. Alex's grip tightened on the wheel. "Looks like we might catch some rough weather," he called out, his voice tense. The atmosphere among the friends shifted as the ocean grew violent. They gathered closer in the cabin, watching the swell of the sea. Then, without warning, a massive shadow passed beneath their boat. The vessel rocked violently, throwing Leah against the side with a startled cry. "What was that?" Jenna shouted, peering over the edge, her face pale with fear. "Something big," Marco replied, scanning the water. "Bigger than any whale." The boat rocked again, more violently this time, as if something immense had struck it from below. Water splashed over the sides, soaking them. Panic set in as they realized they were not alone, and whatever was with them was massive and possibly malevolent. Alex struggled to keep control of the boat as another shadow, even larger, obscured the deep water beneath them. The ocean seemed to roil with hidden energy, an ancient force awakened. The friends clung to each other, eyes wide with terror. Then, from the depths, a colossal shape emerged, breaking the surface with a force that sent waves crashing against the boat. It was a fin larger than any shark's, slick and black against the stormy sea. The Megalodon. It circled the boat, its massive body just beneath the surface, a dark silhouette of unimaginable size and power. Leah screamed, her voice lost against the roar of the wind and waves. "We need to get back to shore," Alex yelled, fighting with the wheel as the boat lurched beneath them. But the creature was relentless. With a mighty surge, it rammed the boat, cracking the hull. Water began to flood in, the sea claiming its territory with hungry, relentless force. The friends scrambled for life jackets, their hearts pounding with primal fear. As they prepared to abandon the boat, the Megalodon surfaced again, its enormous jaws opening wide. The sight of rows upon rows of serrated teeth, each the size of a hand, was paralyzing. In a desperate move, Marco grabbed a flare gun, firing it into the sky, hoping against hope that someone would see it and come to their rescue. The flare arced through the sky, a bright red beacon against the gray clouds. The giant shark, startled by the sudden light and perhaps the sound, dove back beneath the waves, giving them a moment's respite. "Jump, now!" Jenna cried, leading the way as they dove into the rough sea, swimming frantically away from the sinking boat. Behind them, the Megalodon circled back, its massive tail slapping the water as it prepared for another charge. The friends swam with desperate energy, heading towards a distant shore that seemed impossibly far away. The terror of the deep was real, and it was relentless. As they swam, the vast shadow of the Megalodon loomed beneath them, a reminder that in the depths of the ocean, man was not the apex predator. The shore was their only salvation, a sliver of hope in the horror-filled waters of the Atlantic. The cold grasp of the ocean seemed unyielding as Jenna, Alex, Marco, and Leah fought through the turbulent waves, each stroke fueled by sheer terror. Their minds raced with the image of the gargantuan creature that lurked beneath, its massive form a constant shadow trailing just below them. The storm overhead mirrored their turmoil, with lightning streaking across the sky, briefly illuminating the sea's wrath. The group was scattered by the force of the waves, each struggling to maintain a line of sight with the others. Jenna, the strongest swimmer, kept glancing back, counting heads to ensure no one was missing. Her heart pounded not just with the effort of swimming, but also with the fear of losing one of her friends to the abyss. "Keep going, don't stop," Jenna yelled, her voice barely audible over the howling wind. The shore was still a daunting distance away, but it was their only chance. They had to make it to land. Marco, gasping for breath, managed to pull alongside Leah. He grabbed her hand, determined not to let her be swept away. "We'll make it," he assured her, though his eyes betrayed his fear. Suddenly, a massive wave surged beneath them, more forceful than the others. It lifted them momentarily, a terrifying ride that ended as they crashed back into the churning water. Leah choked on the salty brine, her grip on Marco's hand tightening. When she surfaced, gasping, Marco was no longer beside her. She spun around in a panic. "Marco!" she screamed. A few meters away, Alex struggled to reach them, fighting against the current that seemed intent on pulling him back to the open sea. His eyes met Leah's, and without a word, he understood the situation. He changed his course, heading towards Marco, who was flailing in the water, trying to regain his composure after being hit by the rogue wave. The Megalodon's presence was ominously silent for those frantic moments, but as Alex reached Marco, pulling him up by the life jacket, the shadow returned, vast and menacing beneath the stormy surface. The creature was circling them, its movements causing the water to eddy and swirl dangerously. "They're hurting us," Alex gasped, realization dawning on him with chilling clarity. "Like prey." Jenna, hearing his words, felt a surge of defiance. "Not today," she muttered. She began to swim more strategically, using the waves to her advantage, leading the group in a zigzag pattern, trying to confuse the creature. As they neared the shore, their bodies ached and their lungs burned from exertion and swallowed water. The beach, lined with jagged rocks and sparse vegetation, offered little comfort but was a welcome sight nonetheless. They pushed through the last few meters with a desperate burst of energy, propelled by the primal fear of being dragged back into the deep. They stumbled onto the sand, coughing and collapsing from exhaustion and relief. For a moment they lay there, listening to the waves crashing violently behind them, the threat of the Megalodon looming in their minds. "We need to keep moving," Jenna urged, her voice raspy. "Get away from the water. It might come closer." Helping each other up, they made their way to higher ground, their soaked clothes heavy on their limbs. As they climbed over the rocky terrain, Leah looked back at the churning ocean. "Do you think it's still following us?" Alex shook his head, his face grim. "I don't know, but we can't risk it. We need to find help." The storm continued to rage as they moved further inland, their bodies marked by cuts and bruises, their spirits battered but unbroken. They needed to find shelter and warn others about the creature. The Megalodon was not just a legend. It was real, and it was deadly. As they ventured into the unfamiliar terrain, the isolation of their situation became painfully clear. They were alone, injured and hunted. The real horror of their predicament was just beginning to set in. The ocean had not been the only danger. Now the land itself seemed fraught with unknown threats. Their escape was far from over. The terrain ahead was daunting, an unforgiving mixture of dense underbrush and steep cliffs that rose sharply from the beach. The four friends, soaked and shivering, struggled through the tangled vegetation, their minds clouded with exhaustion and fear. The relentless rain, driven by the howling wind, lashed at them, turning the path into a slippery morass. As they pushed inland, the reality of their isolation deepened. The quaint beach town where they had started their vacation seemed a world away, swallowed by the storm and the sea. Jenna, leading the group, tried to maintain a brave face, her eyes scanning the surroundings for any sign of civilization, or worse, the presence of the Megalodon. "Look for a house or a road," she instructed, her voice barely audible over the storm. "Anything that might mean people, shelter." The group stumbled upon a narrow trail that wound up the cliffside, promising a vantage point from which they could assess their location. As they climbed, the wind intensified, threatening to topple them back towards the sea. Leah, the most vulnerable, clung to Marco's arm, her teeth chattering uncontrollably. At the top of the cliff, they found a momentary shelter under a rocky overhang. The view it afforded was both breathtaking and terrifying. The ocean roiled below them, a vast expanse of angry waves, while the storm painted the sky in swaths of gray and black.
"I can't see any houses," Alex said, squinting into the rain. "Just more forest and cliffs. We might be farther from help than we thought." Their hearts sank with this realization. The day was fading, and the idea of spending a night exposed in this hostile environment sent shivers down their spines, not entirely from the cold. "It's going to be dark soon," Marco pointed out, his voice laden with worry. "We need to find a place to hold up until the morning." They resumed their trek, moving along the cliff's edge, searching for any sign of a path leading away from the ocean. The vegetation became denser, a jungle that seemed to swallow them whole, dampening the sound of the storm but not the fear that rode with it. Suddenly Jenna halted, her hand raised for silence. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. The others listened intently. Through the howl of the wind, a faint sound reached them, something different from the natural tumult, a clanging like metal striking metal. It was rhythmic and deliberate. They exchanged looks of mixed fear and hope. "Someone must be out there," Jenna concluded. They moved towards the sound, their pace quickening with renewed urgency. The source of the noise led them to a clearing where the silhouette of a small, dilapidated cabin appeared like a ghost through the sheets of rain. The metal sound was louder now, and they could see the shape of a figure hammering on something outside the cabin. Approaching cautiously, they called out, their voices catching in their throats. The figure stopped hammering and turned towards them. It was an old man, his face rugged and weather-worn, much like Mr. Ketch's, but marked with an intensity that spoke of long, lonely years. "Who are you?" he asked gruffly, his eyes narrowing as he assessed them. We were on a boat. There's something in the water," Jenna replied, the memory of the Megalodon surfacing in her mind like a dark wave. The man's expression shifted slightly, a flicker of recognition, or was it fear, passing over his features. "You best come inside then," he said, turning back to his work. "We'll talk where it's dry." Relieved yet apprehensive, the group followed him into the cabin, a sparse shelter that seemed hardly more secure than the wilderness they had left behind. Inside, the man stoked a small fire in an old wood stove, the warmth a small comfort against the cold fear that clung to their wet clothes. As they huddled around the fire, the man looked them over, his gaze lingering on each face. "You've seen it, haven't you?" he finally said, his voice low. "The beast from the deep." His words hung in the air, heavy with a terror that now had a name. The Megalodon was real, and they were not its only witnesses, or its only victims. Their night of horror was far from over, and the storm outside was not the only darkness they would have to face.
The cabin's dim interior flickered with the firelight, casting eerie shadows on the walls, which were lined with old maritime maps and faded photographs of ships and rugged fishermen. The old man introduced himself as Elias, a retired sailor who had chosen solitude after a life at sea, a life that, like Mr. Ketch's, seemed marked by encounters with the unfathomable. As the storm raged outside, Elias poured them each a cup of strong, bitter tea, his hands steady despite the haunting tales he was about to unveil. The group gathered around, their clothes still damp, their minds racing with dread and curiosity. "You've encountered the Megalodon, the apex predator of ancient waters thought extinct," Elias began, his voice a grave murmur against the howling wind. "But as you've seen, some legends refuse to die. That creature has haunted these waters for centuries, maybe more. It's not just a shark. It's a relic of a time when the world was a wilder place." "Why here? Why now?" Jenna asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias paused, considering her question with a furrowed brow. "This part of the ocean holds deep trenches, unseen rifts that might connect to the depths where such beasts could hide. The Megalodon you saw is likely drawn to the surface by changes in the ocean's climate, or by its instincts to feed." The cabin seemed to shrink as the reality of their situation set in. Outside, the occasional thunderclap punctuated Elias's exposition, a reminder of their fragile shelter against the elements and the horrors lurking nearby. Marco shifted uncomfortably. "But how do we stop it? We can't just hide and hope it goes away. Elias looked at Marco with a grimace. "This creature has survived the ages," he explained. "You don't just stop such a force of nature, but," he paused, "there might be ways to avoid attracting its attention." He went on to describe old sailors' tales of warding off dangerous sea creatures, methods ranging from sound frequencies disliked by sharks to ancient rituals believed to protect mariners from harm. "These might be mere superstitions," he conceded, "but when faced with the depths of the unknown, even superstitions can offer hope." The conversation turned to survival strategies. Elias proposed they remain in the cabin until the storm subsided, giving them time to devise a plan. "The Megalodon is an efficient hunter," he noted, "drawn to movement and noise. Your best chance is to stay out of the water and avoid any activities that could be perceived as prey behavior." As night deepened, the storm outside did not abate, and the ocean's roars mixed with the wind's wails, creating a symphony of threats. Elias shared stories of his own encounters with the Megalodon, each tale more harrowing than the last, painting a picture of a creature not just surviving, but thriving in the unseen depths. Unable to sleep, the friends took turns keeping watch, peering out the small, rain-streaked windows at the tumultuous sea that had almost claimed their lives. Their thoughts were haunted by the image of the monstrous shark, its eyes soulless and ancient, a living nightmare. In the early hours of the morning, as Leah stood watch, a louder than usual crack of thunder shook the cabin. She peered into the darkness, her eyes straining to see through the storm. Suddenly, a large shadow passed briefly across the beach, visible in the flash of lightning. Her heart skipped a beat. The Megalodon was still out there, perhaps waiting, perhaps watching. Leah woke the others, her voice a mix of fear and urgency. "It's close. I saw it." They gathered at the windows, watching the storm-lit beach. The creature was a ghostly presence, its outline merging with the waves, a reminder of their vulnerability and the sheer scale of the predator they faced. Elias's voice cut through their fear. "We'll need to be smarter, quieter, and more cunning than the beast," he said. "We survive the night, we plan at dawn. Remember, the ocean has many secrets, some best left undiscovered, but now that you've seen what lies beneath, it's up to you to carry the burden of that knowledge." Their vigil continued, the weight of Elias's words settling over them like the storm clouds above. They were in a battle not just for survival, but against the very essence of primal fear, against a legend that had come violently to life. As dawn broke, the storm subsided, leaving the world eerily calm. The ocean, however, remained restless, its waves still churning with an undercurrent of hidden danger. The four friends and Elias, their unexpected guardian, gathered to devise a plan, their faces drawn and weary from a night devoid of sleep. Elias laid out a rudimentary map of the coastline on the old wooden table. "Here," he pointed to a narrow inlet a few miles north of the cabin. "This channel has old harpoon cannons installed from decades ago. Fishermen used them for whales long ago before such practices were banned. If we can lure the Megalodon there, we might stand a chance at driving it away from these shores." Jenna, her resolve hardened by the horrors they had witnessed, nodded in agreement. "Let's do it. Let's end this nightmare." They equipped themselves with what little they had, flares, a couple of makeshift spears, and an old rusted harpoon that Elias had kept as a relic. The plan was desperate, relying more on luck and their wits than any actual firepower. The trek to the inlet was tense, each rustle in the underbrush a signal to their frazzled nerves. Reaching the cliff overlooking the channel, they saw the old harpoon cannons, still menacing even in their obsolescence. Elias instructed them on how to load and fire the cannon. "It's all about timing," he explained. "We need to draw it in close enough." Alex and Marco took positions at the first cannon, while Jenna and Leah prepared the flares, hoping to use them to guide the Megalodon towards the trap. The waiting was agonizing, the silence punctuated only by the occasional seagull's cry and the relentless surf. Then, a dark shape appeared in the water, its size casting a shadow even through the depths. The Megalodon was approaching,
drawn by the disturbance they had created on its way to the inlet. "Now!" Elias shouted. Alex and Marco fired the first harpoon, the chain rattling as the spear shot towards the massive shadow. The water exploded around the point of impact, but the harpoon had only grazed the beast, provoking it into a frenzy. The Megalodon turned sharply, its massive body creating waves that crashed against the cliffs. Jenna and Leah launched flares, the bright burning lights arcing through the morning sky and landing near the creature, corralling it towards the second cannon. As the Megalodon aligned with their position, Jenna gave the signal, and Elias fired the second cannon. This time the harpoon struck true, embedding deeply into the creature's flank. The beast thrashed wildly, its tail whipping up a storm of foam and spray. For a moment it seemed as if the ocean itself was fighting back, the Megalodon's movement so powerful that the ground trembled beneath their feet. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the thrashing stopped. The beast lay still, the dark waters around it turning a foreboding shade of red. Silence fell over the group as they watched the creature that had haunted their nightmares. Elias laid a hand on Jenna's shoulder. "It's over," he said softly. "But remember, the sea holds more secrets than we can fathom. Today you have faced one of its darkest." The return to the cabin was solemn, each person lost in their thoughts, the weight of their ordeal a heavy cloak around their shoulders. They had survived, but at a cost they were only just beginning to understand. In the days that followed, the story of their encounter with the Megalodon would spread, first as a rumor, then as a chilling account of bravery and survival against ancient terror. The town of Seabridge would remember them not just as visitors, but as the ones who faced the depths and emerged to tell the tale. As they prepared to leave Seabridge, the ocean calm as if nothing had ever disturbed its waters, they knew their lives would never be the same. They had looked into the abyss, challenged it, and though they had emerged victorious, the echo of that primal fear would follow them forever. Their journey had begun as a simple vacation, a break from the mundane, but it had transformed into a testament to human courage and the enduring mystery of the vast, untamed ocean, a reminder that some legends, no matter how unbelievable, are rooted in truth.